How would choosing a new manager change the approach in the offseason for Alex Anthopoulos and the type of player that he goes after, or potentially the type of player they might look to trade away? I'll answer those questions and many more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. We have reached over 15,000 subscribers. We did it before the division series even started. So thank you so much for your support there and helping us get over 15K. So now we start for the journey for 20K. And thank you so much again for all your support there on the YouTube side, on the audio side, where we still get the majority of our listeners. You can help out too. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Today is our weekly mailbag episode. As generally we do, we have about 20 questions to answer, a wide variety of questions, although a lot of them, as you might expect, have to do with the managerial search and how that's going to impact the team going forward. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Well, let's jump right into the questions because this is the case. I tend to run out of time at the end answering some of these. Starting right at the top, Regular 2 says, with so many starters returning from injury, is going to a 70s and 80s style pitching plan feasible? That style was a starter going 6 innings and a different long reliever finishing the game most days. I thought this was where the game was going, or the case that Regular is making here. I thought it was going to be a shift back to how we did things in the past, or how things were done in the past, where you'd have a Raleigh Fingers come out and finish the game, 3 innings. I thought that's where the game was headed about 5 or 6 years ago, that we were going to see that. You got all these pitchers that, have really good stuff, but they can't go deep into games, or, with the data that we see now with pitchers struggling a second and third time through an order. I really thought we were going to get to a place in today's game where it's going to be, you have your starter and then you have your piggyback on them that can finish the game. And I still think there's a world in which that strategy could work, but I still think we are too reliant on, here's my 7th inning guy, here's my 8th inning guy, here's my 9th inning guy. And I still think that is how most managers manage today. I think that style could work. I think you could certainly piggyback it. Let's say, I keep using this guy a lot lately, but young Carlos Lara, maybe he can't hold up over, 5-6 inning stretches. I think AJ Smith-Shawver might have been headed in this direction before he started to figure some things out, but maybe you piggyback him like that. And a guy, let's just use AJ Smith-Shawver as an example, somebody that in the past we have seen that velocity doesn't hold in the 4th, 5th, 6th inning. So you use a starter that's going to give you 5 or 6, and then you bring in an AJ Smith-Shawver to finish it out. Problem with that is you got a man in your bullpen that, okay, you do that with AJ Smith-Shawver, you use them for 3 to 4 innings out of the bullpen to finish off a game. You now have a dead arm in your bullpen for the next 3 or 4 days. So you got 2 arms at that point, right? You got your starter and you got your bulk inning reliever. And we've seen how the Braves this past year, say they're in a blowout game and they bring in Dylan Dodd and he goes 3 innings to finish it off. What do they do right after that game? They option Dylan Dodd to get a fresh arm up there. And so that's why I don't think you'll see a team fully go back to that strategy. I think it could work. I think it may be, let's say for a Bryce Elder, for example, a guy who was in the past has really struggled to get through a lineup a 3rd time. So you have a long reliever that is dedicated to, okay, when Bryce Elder leaves his start, this guy's coming in to finish off the rest of the game. But most managers are going to let that situation dictate it. If Bryce Elder leaves the game and they're down by 4 runs, okay, you bring in this guy, you let him throw 3 or 4 innings, and you let him just cover the rest of the game. You got a game where Bryce Elder leaves after 5 innings and you're winning by 4 runs. Okay, well, I want to use my best relievers to make sure that I get this win. So I don't think, even though I thought that this is where the game was going to go. I still don't think we're there. And I don't think you can do that for every starter. I think maybe you can pick a handful of starters here or there, again, who really struggle to go deep in the games, really struggle with the lineup a third time through, that you can say, okay, I've got this dedicated reliever that if he only gets through 5 innings today, we go to this guy to finish it off. But that was a long-winded answer to answer your question, though. Definitively, no, I don't think they'll fully go back to that style of approach. Calvin Finner asks, with Texas looking to shed payroll, how would you feel about a Sean Murphy for Corey Seager structured deal? Of course, more would have to find in both. Sorry, I didn't get the rest of that question. There would have to be more on both sides, but rotating Seager through DH and letting Allen start once a week or so at shortstop may keep him healthier. Let me look up that Corey Seager deal really quickly, because I'm pretty sure it's kind of an atrocious deal. Money. I mean, Corey Seager is a great player when healthy, obviously, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot of money that Alex Anthopoulos would not be comfortable doing. Yeah, it's $31.5 million through 2031, his age 37 season. So you'd be paying $31.5 million to a guy going into his mid to late 30s for somebody that can't really stay healthy. And I get with some of that, you're going to be offsetting Sean Murphy's costs for the next 2 years, I believe. You'd only be, I guess, essentially paying him, 15 or 16.5 million for the years of Sean Murphy's deal. But I just still don't see AA taking on that type of money again, especially for somebody who's been healthy or have had issues staying healthy and being on the field. Michael says, how much impact does a manager actually have on their team? So good question, something we've discussed in the past. And I don't know Michael, you asked the same question over on Lindsay's podcast or newsletter, but I saw that was the title of his newsletter. So if you haven't checked that out, go do so. Like, my take has been in the past is that managers don't have a huge impact. And I still hold that belief. And even more so after I had CJ Nikowski on the podcast talking about Tim Hires, and CJ alluding to the fact that a lot of players, they have other hitting coaches, guys that they go to. So I'm very much of the belief that coaches don't have as much impact as we think they do. They're just always the easiest ones to blame. And I've said this about Snitker too. While I think it was time to move on and get a new leader, a new voice, I don't put as much of the blame on these past 2 seasons on Snitker as I do the players. But I do think, at least, especially for the manager position, I do think there is a little bit more impact than just a regular hitting, pitching coach, bench coach, because I think they do have to step up at times and be that leader and get the guys going. But ultimately, and I've always held this position, it comes down to the players. Now, there is in-game decision-making that falls on the manager, and you need somebody that can do a good job of that. And I think Snitker failed that way in a lot of ways. And a lot of times this past year, especially, we've seen him fail in those in-game strategies. So again, do managers have an impact? Yes, they absolutely do. But I think especially when it comes to the big league level, I put more of the onus on the players in getting it done than I do the managers. The managers are just the easiest ones to blame and the ones who are always going to take the fall. But clearly, I do think managers have some level of impact. I just don't think it's as big as a lot of fans seem to think it is. Big Dog Fan 73 says, where do you see Southacene sticking at defensively, short or center? Clearly haven't watched him play a lot yet, and hopefully we'll get to do some of that this offseason. I mean, though the sample size that we got on him is very small. Just on the reports that I read during the draft, they make me tend to believe that he's ultimately going to stick in center field. But I think it's really too early to make that distinction. But just on a lot of the reports that I read when he was drafted, I think center field is ultimately where he lands. But the fact that you got a guy that could either play shortstop or center field, 2 of the most demanding defensive positions on the diamond, is very, very encouraging and impressive. So I can't wait to see more of him, but I think we are going to see more of him before we can make that distinction so far. All right, we got a lot more questions to get to on today's podcast. We'll jump back into the rest of those here next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football season here, both NFL and college, you got the MLB postseason going on right now. PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. All you got to do each day, open up your PrizePicks app, see who's pitching that day in the postseason. They'll have a number of strikeouts for that pitcher. You just pick more or less. They'll probably have something on Ohtani, the number of home runs he's going to hit that game. All you do is pick more or less on that and do it for 2 to 6 players. And that's all you got to do. It's that simple. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Also, make sure if you need help controlling the way that you play, you check out Prize Pool's responsible gaming section there on their website. But again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in a lineup after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Thank you again for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Once the postseason gets underway again, so we got this little off day on Friday that I can't stand, you can check out all the action there for the guys at MLB Game Night, and you can see that in your Locked On MLB podcast feed on YouTube and on audio. All right, let's jump back into the questions here, though. The next one coming from ATL Bob, who says, let's say Ha-Seong Kim signs elsewhere. What is our plan? Is there a scenario where we run it back with Nicky? And I'm assuming you mean Nick Allen. You could have also meant Nicky Lopez, but I think you meant Nick Allen. Yes, there is a very real scenario where Nick Allen is your starting shortstop in 2026. There is not a lot of options out there. Unless something comes up in the trade market that we don't see right now. And it's really hard to see right now because who's wanting to give up a starting quality young shortstop? There's just not many teams willing to do that. And there's not a lot of free agents out there that I would consider true everyday shortstops. And not even really Bo Bichette, who's probably going to have to move to second base. It's very, very important that the Braves are able to keep Ha-Seong Kim. Because if not, I think there is a very real scenario where you're trying to piece it together again with Nick Allen. Maybe you're able to get a Willie Castro and stick him in there. The options just aren't great. And so that's why it was a good move for Alex Anthopoulos to go get Ha-Seong Kim and hope that maybe he just picks up that player option. And maybe he still does. It also gives you a window to see what he can do. And it gives you a window to possibly work on something to keep him here long term. But if it's not Ha-Seong Kim, I just don't know where else they go. Like I said, of what we can see right now and what we know is available and are reasonably available on the trade market. Teams just aren't going to trade you their top young prospects that are under arbitration control. It's just not going to happen unless you're trading the farm or they're just idiots. So yeah, there's a very real scenario where the Braves are trying to piece it together at shortstop once again. There's a conversation there to have about Dansby Swanson. Maybe we'll do that in a future episode. Does it matter what this says? How about that huge win by the 49ers over the Rams? I have nothing. Looking forward to the next podcast, though. I'll be honest. I've watched half of a Falcons game this year. I don't know what's going on in the NFL. Don't really care to know, but if you enjoy it, that's cool. PJ's Braves, who do you think will be protected in the Rule 5 draft? Great question, PJ's, everydayer of the podcast. I'll probably get into that in depth on maybe Monday's episode or in an episode to come this month. There are a lot of interesting names that the Braves are going to have to protect. And there are going to be a lot of players still that are moved off the 40-man roster. We saw some the other day: Alexis Diaz, Dane Dunning, Jared Kelenic, Luke Williams. There's going to have to be a lot more guys that are moved off this 40-man roster with all the players on the 60-day IL you got to put on there, and with some of these Rule 5 players that they could lose this year. There are several of them that I think might have to be protected, or you might lose them in the Rule 5 draft. But we'll go over those on a minor spotlight segment in the weeks to come. Tyler Garner says, fun random question. If you were the Braves manager, Would you go full uniform or just go pants and hoodie pullover? The old school part of me wants to say full uni, but I'll be honest, I work from home. I wear gym shorts and a t-shirt every single day. It's getting cool. I almost put on a hoodie this morning. The weather's a little cool right now, which is nice to see. I'd probably go hoodie. So that's just me, but I do like the idea. I love the Bobby Coxes in the world that just put on that full uniform. I do love seeing that, but just me personally, I'm probably rocking the hoodie. AAWX says, I think the chances are really low, like less than 5%. But do you think there is a chance? Chipper was saying he has zero interest in managing out of respect to Snit, because the moment he says he has interest, fans would have been up in arms to move Snit out and bring Chipper in. So I don't think the conversation with Chipper has ever been about managing the team. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I think it's been more about him being a hitting coach. I think that's what most people want. So I don't, and again, I may be wrong here, and I can't remember the context of, I know somebody asked Chipper about possibly, I don't know if they asked him about managing or coaching. So I apologize for that. And, he basically is continue the line. That's not something I want to do right now. But for me personally, with Chipper, it's never been about him managing. I don't even know that I would want Chipper to manage the team. Like I said, I want somebody with experience. I would love for him to be the hitting coach. And that's always been the thing that I've heard the most with Chipper, is fans wanting him to be the hitting coach. And I think it's just a matter of when he's ready, he'll do it. And I just think he's not ready. Maybe he is with a new manager coming in. And there might be some to that if he did take over as hitting coach and doing well, the team's doing well, there could be a push for the fans to promote him. But I don't think so. I don't think that really had a lot of reasoning for why Chipper hasn't wanted to get into coaching. I think, again, credit to him, he just wants to spend time with his family, and I think that is an excellent choice, an admirable decision for him. But yeah, the moment he says I'm ready, I want him on this coaching staff somewhere, preferably as a hitting coach. Matt Olson Burner says, do you think the daily batting order will become a group decision like it is for other teams with a new manager? AA said many times the lineup was 100% Snit's decision, but with a new manager, does that change? So that AA and the analytics guys help set the batting order. I don't think it's going to change AA's style, and AA's style has always been, I'm going to leave this up to the manager. Now, it may depend on who that manager is. If you were to get a more analytically minded manager who strictly just puts the lineup together based on the analytics in that matchup of that day, which I'm okay for, then maybe he does, look to the front office for help, or have somebody in the front office, maybe not necessarily AA, but I'm sure they have some smart guys there that can pull numbers just like we all can, and tell you what are the best matchups for the day and what is the ideal lineup based on who you're facing that day, which managers should be doing. I don't care how old school you are. You have numbers there to tell you what the best matchups are. Still use your gut and your instinct with the way that a player is hitting. But I still think there should be some of that no matter what. But I don't think AA is going to change where he's going to say, this new manager, we got the front office, our team, our data and analyst guys, they got to be part of the daily lineup decision. I don't think AA is going to change that stance. I think it'll be more so on the new manager if that's his stance in the way that he wants to do it. I did not know I had my own burner, but apparently I do. Jake Mastriani burner says, if you could go into AA's office for the offseason, what moves would you make regarding players and manager? Also, should Hugh Freeze keep the Auburn job? I'll say this about Hugh Freeze, and I'm not, baseball season's still going on. I haven't completely turned my attention to college football as of yet. He was thought to be an offensive guy coming in, and whatever you can say, maybe hasn't found the right quarterback. Well, you should have found the right quarterback right now with the transfer portal. You should have found the right quarterback your first year in here. And he hasn't been able to get it done offensively. They're wasting a great defense right now because the offense is so putrid. Now, all that said, 2 tough losses on the road against quality opponents that were very close games that if you had some semblance of an offense, you win. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. But certainly I was expecting big offensive changes coming in with Hugh Freeze, and it hasn't been there. But if I was for the Braves and the Braves front office, what moves would I make regarding players and manager? Sorry to disappoint you, Jake Mastriani burner, but I'm going to do that in a future episode. I will completely break down what my perfect offseason would look like. So we'll do that in a future episode. Sorry, I'm going to push on some of these questions, but we got a lot of month left to get to before the offseason actually begins. And so I want to save some of that stuff for fuller podcast episodes. All right, we got about 5 or 6 questions left to get to on today's episode. We'll finish those up here next. The NFL season is here, and so are the Major League Baseball playoffs. And FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff and first pitch with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel allows you to bet the way that you like with player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in as the action unfolds. It makes every game a little bit more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, or you're just hate watching in the postseason. You look at the odds right now on FanDuel for the rest of the postseason, or at least for the DS. They have the Mariners as the favorite. They have the Yankees as the favorite over the Blue Jays right now in the American League. And then over on the National League, they have the Dodgers as favorites over the Phillies and the Brewers as favorites over the Cubs. But all of those really, really close, at least if I'm reading these odds correctly, and that is questionable. But all of these should be pretty tight matchups. And again, you can see those odds over on FanDuel.com. They have Ohtani as the big favorite to win the ALCS MVP. We haven't even got to the CS yet. They have Ohtani to win the World Series MVP as well. You can see all of that on FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. So are you ready? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, a couple more questions to get to, including our title question that I'm just now getting to in the third segment. Matt Olson Burner says, in your opinion, does a new manager change AA's approach in free agency? For example, a new manager might not stick with slumping veterans so long. A new manager might actually play 2 catchers every day. I think that could impact who AA brings back or brings in. So it's an interesting question, and it's why I think you have to make this managerial decision first before you get into the offseason, before you start making moves. So I don't think this managerial search is going to take long, even though it's great for the content right now. And personally, I don't want it to take too long. I want to know who it is. But I think it does have some decision-making in how the offseason goes. Is this a manager who is going to be more proactive in giving guys days off? Because if that's the case, I think it opens up the possibilities of who you get in free agency and what you can do in the DH outfield role, utility role, whatever the case may be. If it's going to be a manager that says, I don't care if you want to play every day, you haven't gotten a hit in 2 weeks, that we are going to bench you. I think that could change some things. Is it a manager that's okay with playing 2 catchers every day? The Braves obviously have 2 good catchers. I'm hoping that Sean Murphy gets this hip issue taken care of and can go back to being one of the better catchers in baseball, like he has been in the first halves of seasons when healthy. And if that's the case, are you okay with that? And so I think those could have a slight impact on how AA approaches free agency in the offseason. I still think at the end of the day, there are still certain areas that you're going to have to fix no matter who the manager is. But the type of player that you go get, I think, is the question here, that it could matter based on that manager and how that manager manages. So I do think it could have some impact on who you get in free agency. Kathy G says, everyone's assuming a lockout after 2026. I know the history. Is there any hope of avoiding that other than salary cap floor? What are the other sticking points? It would be so bad for baseball as it's finally building back. Thanks as always. So I don't know of all the issues right now, but you're right that the salary cap, salary floor does seem to be the big sticking point and what could ultimately lead to a lockout. You remember last time, it didn't miss any time during the season, but it went pretty far into the season, into, I believe it was February, before things finally got resolved. And, those didn't even seem as big as issues as what we have now with the players. It's all about money. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's all about money. The owners are trying to hold on to as much as they possibly can. The players are trying to get as much as they possibly can. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. And it's a matter of, do the owners say, this is a hard sticking point that we got to have a salary cap and we're not budging without this? Or do they use that as this, the carrot or the stick, whichever one it is, to get something else done that they want to get done? That's how these negotiations always go. You have your big sticking item, and that might not get resolved, but you may budge on that area so that you can get something else. That's always how these negotiations go. It really does. Whether or not we have a lockout and whether or not we miss most of or some of 2027, if not, I don't think they would miss all. I don't think it would go that far, but I think it is ultimately going to come down to the salary cap, salary floor situation. And I think it's more of the salary cap. I think owners want a salary cap. Players absolutely do not want a salary cap. I want a salary floor personally, make these, bottom feeder teams spend a little bit more. But that's what it's going to come down to, is how hard do the owners go after this salary cap? And that's ultimately what is going to determine if they miss time in 2027. Waldrop Splitter says, if you could sign 3 free agents this offseason, who are you to sign and why? Again, not to punt some of these questions, but I will do a full episode breakdown of that in the weeks to come. But I'll say, if I only had 3, if I could only get 3 free agents, I want 1 big bat that can DH, play in the outfield. I want 1 mid-rotation starter, and I want 1 setup. If I could only do those 3 things, that's exactly what I would want. Matt H says, how would you compare our prospect pitching depth to last year? Richie, Burkhalter, and Fuentes will probably see the field next year. Waldrop was great. Murphy and Sennard can fly through the system, and Hackenberg can maybe rebound, not even mentioning quad A guys. So I do think the Braves' depth, even right now, is better than what you had going into last year. I remember talking about it in spring training last year, that you had your 5 guys, and then after that, you had Bryce Elder. And that was really it. And Bryce Elder was up and down to begin the season. AJ Smith-Shawver came on and was good, but it was really last year. I feel like you had 7 guys that you were somewhat comfortable with. I feel like there's already more than that, but some of these are question marks. I mean, Fuentes, again, I felt like he was rushed up. I feel like he was put in a bad spot, but he's at least has some experience. J.R. Ritchie, I don't know how much experience you need to see from him at AAA, but we haven't seen him at the big league, so we don't know. Lucas Braun is another one. I don't think you mentioned here, but somebody that I think is deserving of a chance. Blake Burkhalter, whether it's a starter or reliever role, I think could get there. So I do think that there's a lot of depth, a lot more depth that's been proven at the higher levels that could be there, but these are still unknowns for the team. Kevin Depew says Yachty for manager. I think Yachty's going to be part of Pujols' staff in LA if that does officially happen. I just never liked Yachty the player personally, but that doesn't mean he won't be a great manager. But again, for me, my number one point that I put on yesterday's episode, I want somebody with MLB experience, somebody that's been through the grind, played in post or banished in postseason games. That's my number one quality that I want in our next coach, and that's not Yachty. Dave Bessie says, as crazy as it sounds, should we be rooting for the Phillies, knowing how hard it is to repeat if they were to win it all? Are they a little less hungry next year, which leaves the door open for the Braves to take back the NL? No, in no case situation ever, Dave, should you be rooting for the Phillies. So no, not at all. And then last one from PJs, who says, forget current coaching situations availability. You can have anyone be the next manager. Who do you want? So I've said this name for a while now, and I was a little disappointed to hear that he wasn't going to be available this offseason, and that's Torey Lovullo of the Diamondbacks. I think he's one of the best managers in baseball. I think he gets a lot out of his teams, and I like the way that his offense plays. So I've always really liked Torey Lovullo, but the Diamondbacks decided to bring him back. There was the talk of maybe that they would move on from him, in which he would have been at the top of my list. But I do really like Torey Lovullo. He's always been at the top of my list for managerial candidates. That will do it for this episode. As Double A says, never root for the Mets or Phillies. Absolutely not. Thanks for joining, Double A, Matthew, Marquise. I appreciate you joining as well. Scott Bingham, Robert C, Stephen P, Bolt 66. I appreciate you being here, giving you a break from law school. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to everybody that was here live on the episode, those watching as well. Hope you all have a great weekend. Enjoy some postseason action as the division series gets underway. We'll be back on Sunday, maybe Sunday, Monday. Either way, we'll have 5 more episodes next week. So we'll still be talking a lot about the managerial search. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. We will talk to you next time.